Okay, cool. Thanks. Um, Good to be here. Sorry for some of the complications. Um, my name is Sacagawea Hall. Folks know me as Saki. I'm a member of Cooperation Jackson and excited to do part two of this Black August African People on the Move series. Um, and thank you, shout out to Black Liberation Media for hosting this today and hosting us last week. And then again, we'll be here next Wednesday for the part three. Um, so I wanted to, aside from mentioning Black Liberation Media, mention the organizations that are a part of the like pre-conversation that led up to this teaching. So again, that's my organization, Cooperation Jackson. That's Community Movement Builders. We have Black Alliance for Peace. We have MWAMCO, the Revolutionary Socialist League that's in Kenya, along with the Communist Party of Kenya. One of our guests that we're expecting represents Organic Intellectual Network. And I'm hoping that the comrades in Kenya are able to make it. One of the other comrades is with the Madari Social Justice Center. And so collectively, we talked about sharing and having a teach-in so that folks throughout the diaspora, especially in particular, are able to hear about what's happening in Kenya from the ground. And then also recognizing that Kenya, as a neocolonial puppet regime, is also playing a major role as a tool for US imperialism by going into Haiti and policing Haitians during this time. And so we're going to be talking about what's happening in Haiti and the relationship between Haiti and Kenya right now and the dominance of the United States. Um, I was I guess because I'm not the host, I'm not able to see who all is actually on right now. Um, so I'll set a little bit more of the okay, cool. A little bit more of the context. Was hoping to start off if people were on last time were able to hear about, learn about, and keep track of what was happening in Kenya. I wanted to be able to start off with our comrades there and hear an update from last week's protest. I know that folks, and even at least one of the people who we talked with last week was arrested. Um, and so let's get started with hi, Wangara, Wanga, Waringa. Sorry. You can introduce yourself and pronounce your name properly. Correct me because I know I'm saying it wrong. Um, Thanks for joining us. I mentioned your organization earlier when I listed out the organizations that are a part of pulling this together and coordinating the series that Black Liberation Media is hosting. Can you give us an update? We were talking last week. We focused on the uprising, the protest, and the demands of Kenyans. You know, a number of the comrades that were on shared with us the conditions that are happening on the ground and what led up to this call for Rudo's regime to go. And since then, there's been more more happening and more protests, but also more repression. Can you share a little bit about that? Looks like you might be on mute. We're not hearing you, even though your computer doesn't say you're on mute. it's not showing the mute symbol. So maybe check in and make sure that the computer is using your microphone and not something else. Um, and in the meantime, I see that we've also been joined by Booker Omoyele. Hi, greetings.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Um,
Can you hear? I
yeah,
hope I'm clear enough.
we can hear you, and so maybe while there's Moringa is doing some troubleshooting, you can share with us an update since last week.
Okay, that is basically in relation to the social explosion in the streets in Kenya.
Yes.
Probably it's important to put it in some historical context that the Kenyan protests have been by and large against the claim of our independence, the claim of our sovereignty as a people in Kenya, because the tipping point was actually the IMF backed finance bill 2024. But it's also important to note that this is not the first time an IMF bill 2020, an IMF backed bill was being rejected by the majority of the Kenyan people. The IMF bill, backed bill 2023, was rejected as well. Only that the amount of mobilization and anger only was able to be realized this year and not last year. But even last year, there were several demonstrations to oppose President William Samoei Ruto's, you know, Finance Bill 2023, which was basically an architect of IMF and World Bank. And also, remember that the advisors that are in charge of our central bank, that are the economic advisors to our president, are all appointees of World Bank and IMF. That is the detail that we are dealing with. So primarily on 25th, or on 25th of last month, the people's camp managed to, to make their way into parliament and to evict the parliamentarians that were actually passing an anti-people finance bill, and that made us on the news. But to look at the character of the what we call an uprising, there are some sectors that will want to call it a revolution, but for us, we see it as an uprising because without a revolutionary theory, without the organized forces being the dominant forces in the street, it is premature to say that Kenya is going through a revolutionary moment. In fact, the Communist Party of Kenya, which I represent, together with other progressive and revolutionary voices, including the social justice centers, have the correct analysis that the only primary objective for us is to populate our ranks with the best cadres that we have recruited from the streets, to actually expand our organization and even deepen our roots within the masses as we even continue to bring clarity to the crisis of capitalism that we are experiencing in our country today. Now, basically, after the 25th, like there was a direct confrontation between the minority billionaire class that have been administering the affairs of the Kenyan people on behalf of their foreign backers. There was a clash between those few minority, which in our own analysis we call them the comprado class, the comprado bourgeoisie, against the people. So the this ruling elite was losing the grip on power because for the first time they had lost one of the most important tools to sustain power. And it basically means that they had lost the power of information, they had lost the power of propaganda. they cannot, it reaches a point that the ruling class could not divide the protesters in the street along tribal or religious or even sex lines. So this is important to underline that the ruling class lost it completely. And both the opposition, the main opposition party and the ruling party had a meeting for self-preservation. So the ruling party met with the opposition that they have been pretending to be protagonists. But in actual sense, there is nothing protagonist against them. In fact, they are indeed just their differences, their contradictions as a class is only apparent, but it is not anchored in any reality. So now, after the 25th incident, after about 64 of our comrades were martyred in parliament, what basically happens is that the ruling class joined hands. Both the opposition and the government came together, and they started again the tribal segmentization, segmenting the country. It is also important to note that the demobilization exercise that is underway now, not just by the state, but by the state and the opposition, is to say that President William Samoei Ruto actually backed down the finance bill 2024. But for us, it's clear in our head that the finance bill 2024 was not a compromise. It was a product of the struggle that the Kenyan martyred to defend that process of implementing an anti-people finance bill that was actually a foreign intervention policy. Anyway, uh, be it as it may, what we have to know that mainly the middle class have left the streets. The unorganized forces have left the streets. So the people remaining in the streets are mainly the organized forces that have been occupying that street for the longest time. And the middle class and the middle forces are saying that President William Samoei Ruto actually dropped the finance bill, and indeed, there is, if we continue to carry out protests, their businesses will be affected, and this is not what they like to do, which we know is their class baggage. So last Thursday, about uh, out of the 10 million people that were in the streets on 25th, only about 200,000 people appeared in the street, which 10% of the people who were in the street were arrested in the street, brutalized, and persecuted by the state. Even though now they are released, but one of the tactics of the state is to make sure that they arrest more people. We have to raise, cash bill to pay for them. So it's actually to bankrupt the people's camp. That is what the government is trying to do, supported by the opposition. So the these street protests, we could say it was by and large successful. It was not a nationwide street protest as it was before. The tempo is going down based on the government demobilization exercise on this apparent government of national unity that he has created. And this is what we are dealing with in Kenya today. I don't know how much time I have, but
Yeah, thank you for that. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more briefly about the numbers decreasing, and the some of the other um things that are impacting that, and um what are ways that organizers are trying to either increase those numbers in terms of people being in the street and being visible again, or have another route for um, the real numbers of people in opposition being able to be counted and be seen? Is there other ideas besides taking it to the streets in order to achieve those goals still?
definitely the numbers that have reduced in the street can be attributed to the consistent demobilization that has been taking place through mainly how the government has responded to the aftermath of the of the July 25th, and also mainly the class composition of the people that were in the streets. Remember, for the first time, we had the middle class, we had the influencers in the streets, but for them, it was a reform space for them. It was all about finance bill. But for the revolutionaries and the progressive organizations, we know for a fact that finance bill was just a tipping point. It was not an end in itself. Now, how has the state, led by President William Samoei Ruto, reacted to this problem? Remember the first time they deployed the military they illegally. It's important to acknowledge that they illegally deployed the Kenyan military in the street. But what actually happened was that the this deployment was embraced by the people. So the majority of the Kenyan people embraced the military deployment in the street, and there was a bit of celebrations around armored cars. The militaries did not kill anyone during that particular point. So I think this sent some fears in the people who thought that the military could be able to deter the activities that are on the street. But now they have resigned to using militia and illegal, illegal armed and mainly terrorizing the people, because now they have government militia armed with crude weapons. We have seen foreigners in the street, particularly Sudanese contingents and Ugandan, armed people on the street. So it's basically trying to reduce the numbers on the street through the act of criminality. And also certain social media influencers that were mobilizing people to go to the street are nowhere to be seen. It basically means that the state have literally compromised them, and there is not much hype as it was before. Then definitely bringing the head of opposition into the government and promising to reward him, to campaign for him in the African Union. This is a strategy that has been hatched by not just the local power brokers here, but this is something that has been hatched through White House. Because remember, Obasanjo, who was sent to come and strike a deal between the opposition and the government, continues to play the role that the late Kofi Annan plays, to just try to reconcile the interest of imperialism with the to comply to some stability in form of peace. We have seen Raila himself has gone to his backyard. Joho himself has gone to his backyard to tribally tell people that it is the first time that the community has made it to government in higher positions like, the head of treasury. So these are the total demobilization exercise that have been taking place. But the people's camp is also expanding, because the number of people that we had, organized forces that we had before July 25th have, of course, increased. And we have continued to insist that without an organization, we cannot succeed to actually overthrow the organized violence of the state. While the backward civil societies and NGOs have continued to throw this narrative that the people in the street are leaderless, they are organizationalist, they are tribeless. But the essence is that they do not want an ultimate victory for the people. So they do not want people to continue organizing. So they want people to remain as individual activists and tell them that they can be celebrity activists. That is what is happening around here. Now, it's also important to acknowledge that there are certain interests, because the United States of America, particularly, normally tries to groom a new leader in the street. And even in the current social explosion taking place in Nairobi, the CIA is not sleeping. The United States establishment is not sleeping. The backward NGOs like Open Society, the Soros are not sleeping. They are trying to create new leaders and turn this into some sort of a colored revolution, that in the event that President William Samoei Ruto falls, they can have another puppet to just come and replace him to advance their interests. This is a repeated recipe that they carry out, when such things happen. So if you are to talk of the numbers have considerably reduced in the streets. The organized forces have retreated to make a formidable analysis and to prepare for the second wave of offensive, to make sure that now, when we go to the street next time, it is not just controlled by also an organized forces, but the organized forces will take lead and launch an offensive to its logical conclusion.
Okay, thank you for that. Um, Before we move on, I wanted to see if now that uh, Waringa is on and we think the audio was working, is there anything that you wanted to add in terms of what's next? It's still not working. No. Okay.
It must be a setting somewhere.
Yeah, I think um, the setting in StreamYard might be okay, but you might have to go into a actual setting that's in the computer itself. Um, so if you can keep working on that, and we'll bring you in as soon as we're able to. Um, I missed mentioning and want to say thank you, Booker, for providing all of that analysis. And you're the national vice chairperson for the Communist Party of Kenya. I didn't fully introduce you at first. So um, thanks for that. Kali, did you have anything that you wanted to add? I want to be able to move into Kenya's role and use by the United States, in particular, in occupying Haiti. But before getting into the role that Kenya is playing, we want to hear from Erica, who's with Black Alliance for Peace, around the background. And providing a context. So was there anything that you wanted
No,
to touch on,
only
Kelly?
thing I just would add is I know some of the comrades might not say it, but they are being targeted by the Rougeau regime right now. And so be on the lookout for calls for solidarity and support that we are going to need to provide in a number of different ways to ensure that our people are able to continue to be on the streets in the communities doing the organizing that's going to be necessary. And we need to pay some due attention to the trials and cases that are going to come up, and not let this fall from our purview and from watching it, because that's what they want us to do. Just kind of go to sleep as things kind of calm down. And then they can just lock people up, repress people, and disappear more people. So we can come back to that. But I just wanted to highlight that because, I think Brother Booker is being a little bit modest, even though he's one of the people that's being targeted about, what's going on and what the international movement needs to be aware of and start working towards defending our people.
Yeah, and we definitely want to touch on solidarity. We were thinking that that's one of the ways that we would wrap up with everybody. And so we want to make sure that the point that Kali is raising is definitely something that we touch on and find out, like, how do people stay up to date? How do people get involved? How do we show solidarity? How do we support our comrades in the repression and the state violence um, and like, how do we move from like rhetorical solidarity to action? Um, I think is really important. So so we're gonna get into, because we know there's a relationship between Kenya and Haiti right now. And we've been talking about Kenya and the regime, and its neo-colonial practices, but like also Kenya is playing a role in US imperialism, and exporting that from the continent, and being like the black face of that. So, Erica, can you start off with giving us some background on what's been going on in Haiti, and how did we get to the 2019 point to now? We're in August, where we talk about Black August, and Haiti as the first you know, country to have a successful slave revolt and lead to a Black republic, on this side of the hemisphere, has been really important to radical revolutionary movements throughout the world, within the Black diaspora, and even on the continent. And so the impact that Haiti and the Haitian Revolution has had, and the continuous daring to challenge the United States and other Western imperial powers, um, as something that we've seen, over decades, more than decades, um, and how Haiti, ever since that successful revolution, has been punished.
Yeah. So I start. My name is Erica Keynes. I am a co-coordinator of the Haiti Americas team on the Black Alliance for Peace. And since 2021, the Haiti Americas team has been actively working to disseminate information on what's going on in Haiti, primarily because there's a lot of misinformation about the conditions in Haiti and what leads to these countless calls for occupation. But then also, we wanted to create a base and a strong foundation of movement here in the US that advocates for Haiti and advocates for the sovereignty of Haiti. Um, One of my own personal frustrations is that when we speak about Haiti, it's always a very dated conversation. People speak about Haiti in terms of the revolution and then do not move forward. So there's no discussion about the 15 years of occupation from 1919 to 1931, I believe, or the removal of Aristide in the early 90s, or Guantanamo Bay's first inmates being Haitian refugees, or even what happened in 2004. This year made in January the 20 years since Aristide was removed. So if we consider the context in those conditions, we can see that Haiti has always sort of been um, reprimanded for the daring to be free and for being the first Black nation. But I don't think people speak enough to the conditions of that reprimanding that has left Haiti in a very colonial situation for well over a century now. Haiti has not been able to make any kind of actions and decisions for itself. There has been de facto leader after de facto leader. Even currently, right now, there's a de facto leadership after the removal of Ariel Henry, who was never voted in post the assassination of Jovenel Moise. And with that understanding, we can see just why we're here. But also, I think it's important to note, as the Haiti Americas team has always said, that Haiti has served as a laboratory for the larger Americas. So when the question becomes why Haiti, you can understand that better in the broader context of what's happening in the Americas. When we look at groups like the Core Group, which is an unofficial elected body that makes decisions for Haiti, deciding who the prime ministers are, etc., made up of elected officials in Brazil and Canada and the US, Western nations, France. And then when you look at the Organization of American States, which also does the same, you can track these sort of behaviors throughout the Americas. The Organization of American States' role currently in Venezuela in denying the election process and the election results. So Haiti has been seen or should be seen as a laboratory of what happens with the broader Americas. And that is why it's important, especially demographically or geographically where it's situated, close to Cuba. It is a very strategic decision on behalf of the U.S. to maintain its hegemony in that region to control Haiti. So fast forward to October 2nd, 2023, where the United States presented the resolution 2699 to the United States Security Council, calling for the authorization of a long-planned military intervention in Haiti, which was passed by 13 votes in favor. Russia and China abstained, but this was supported by Brazil and Ecuador, Mozambique, the AUE, which is currently involved in Sudan, the UK, United States, Ghana. This was adopted under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter, and that permits the use of foreign force against the state. And this resolution, however, is in fact an illegal use of the charter itself because it violates the charter. Chapter 7 is intended to address threats to international peace, breaches of the peace and the acts of aggression and the activities of alleged quote unquote gangs in Haiti, which should be seen as paramilitary forces within a single state, do not constitute a threat to international peace. So therefore, they're manipulating the charter to be able to continue an occupation. But despite this, the resolution drafters failed to explain how the situation in Haiti poses such a threat, and it's made the resolution itself an instrument of unprovoked aggression against Haiti, which is exactly what Chapter 7 is supposed to prevent. And this development in October is just part of the longer history of U.S. intervention in Haiti. And then it should also be understood that for the past 3 years, the U.S. has been advocating for an increased military presence in Haiti to protect the puppet government of then unelected and unpopular Ariel Henry. And despite pushing for this intervention, the U.S. has been reluctant to commit its own forces. So it has turned to Mexico, it has gone to Canada, it has gone to Brazil, it has eventually found its way to CARICOM. All of these nations hesitant to lead the mission. And Kenya quickly agreed to lead the intervention. It was swayed by financial incentives and, of course, Western approval. And this has resulted in the U.S.-backed invasion of Haiti, which is being disguised by the leadership of Kenya as an act of Pan-Africanism. But in reality, Black Alliance for Peace has said that this should be understood as not just neocolonialism, but rather blackface imperialism. I don't know if I could continue or if I should stop there.
Well, maybe we can take a pause for a minute to hear about what the reaction was in Kenya to this idea at first, and then the actual implementation of sending a police force to Haiti, and what the relationship is between what we've been talking about and this agreement. And then also I wanted to make sure that we touch base on and hear a little bit about the special NATO ally to NATO designation that Kenya has now received. Booker, can you touch base on that for us? I think we're still trying to get a few of your other comrades on the line.
Thank you, comrade. Now, maybe it's important for us to understand that the type of government that exists in Kenya, but for the first time, the person at the top of that government, which is William Samoei Ruto, represents the most reactionary class in Kenya. And it's not just about the issue of Haiti. Haiti is just an advancement of the United States policies, not just in our country, but now Kenya, the United States imperialism is just not being used to to subjugate the Kenyan people. But now the Kenyan people are being used as an imperialist pawn, to actually advance imperialist interest beyond the Kenyan boundaries. This is the United States looks at Kenya not just as a client state, but they look at Kenya as one of the countries in Africa that can now be used to actually launch proxy wars, not just within Africa, but beyond Africa. So the issue of Haiti actually started through a propaganda to actually create Ruto as a Pan Africanist. He was even advised on how he dresses. His speeches was actually coached to make sure that people were convinced that President William Samoei Ruto is indeed a Pan Africanist. In fact, the social explosion in the streets of Nairobi and the many cities is a big disappointment to the United States, caretakers, because for them, they thought that they are going to run this PR campaign for a long time. But now, the William Samoei Ruto's anti-people policies is being exposed by the Kenyan people. Now, for example, last year, Kenya joined the European states in pushing for a military intervention in Niger. This is a clear example of the policies that President William Samoei Ruto is taking place. Remember, the Communist Party position was that coups are not just coups, they are imperialist perpetuated coups, and they are popular, insurrection from below that represents the majority interest of the people. But still, the first contingent of about 400 Kenyan police officers that arrived in Haiti. This is just using Kenya as a proxy for neocolonial designs for the long suffering of the Haitian islands. But another most important thing, that the deployment of the police force to Haiti is an illegality within the Kenyan constitution. The Kenyan constitution of 2010 does not allow the state to deploy the Kenya police beyond its borders. It allows that we could deploy our military peacekeeping missions, but those peacekeeping missions should have received an approval not just by the people, but the approval of the parliament. Now, when President started this illegality, the progressives went to court to challenge this deployment of police contingent to Haiti. The state lost that case. So even when now the prime minister of Haiti arrived in Nairobi, it was very clear that the court had pronounced itself, and there will be we will not have any police deployment. But President William Ruto, being a sworn enemy of the Kenyan people and the puppet of the United States imperialism, went ahead and failed to inform the Kenyan people that the crisis that the Haitian people are facing are actually not just a gang issue that is being perpetuated by the ruling elite in the global north, but it is actually a deep crisis of the core group that want to subjugate the Haitian people under the dictates of the United States, Canada, and other members of the core group to actually steal from Haiti. This is not a Pan-Africanist intervention. It is not an anti-imperialist intervention, but it is an intervention to continue the neocolonial project that the Haitian people have been subjugated over the years. And as Eric has rightly put it, the French have never, gotten over the hangover that they were beaten and chased out of the Haiti, that they were sent out through a slave revolt. So they continue to think that the Haitian must not be left alone to channel their own dignity. But even having said that, remember the Operation Atlanta and the US-led Operation Prosperity Guardian. This Kenya's participation in that EU and US military operation, in these two operations, Atlanta and Prosperity, Guardian, only reveals that the President William Samoei Ruto is willing and is convinced to only work in the interest of the dictates of the United States imperialism. We have joined forces, against the what the so-called Houthi rebels, in the name of fighting on the side of the United States and and um, and the EU to defeat the progressive Yemeni forces that have only been defending the rights for the Palestinian people to exist. So President William Samoei Ruto and his cabals, his local cabals here, have gone against every wishes of the majority of the Kenyan people to deploy the police to Haiti. And what we continue to challenge in the streets and continue to challenge in the courts, that the policemen that are stationed around the United States Embassy in Prince must immediately pack up and return home. There is nothing they are doing there other than furthering the imperialist, interest there. This is what our attitude is, not just from the Communist Party, but from the majority of the Kenyan people that truly love freedom and peace with justice.
I wanted to maybe try to bring in Louis Maganga with the Revolutionary Socialist League. Thanks for being able to join us. To maybe speak a little bit about the contradiction of propping up this as a Pan-African act, and what Pan-Africanism actually is supposed to be. That contradiction.
Yes, thank you very much once again. It's really nice to see you after we met last year, so it's really nice to be here and to share a platform with you. Yeah, nice to see you. So I think the contradiction is really clear, not only to we, the revolutionary organizations and the progressive forces that are organized, but also to the people themselves. And initially, when President Ruto had gotten into power, as Buka said, there was this image that he was trying to build, and not only him, but of course the forces that had propped him up and that were trying to use him as this image of Pan-Africanism. So there was these statements and declarations that initially he kept saying, Africa should be able to do its own things. We should, for instance, have one single airlines for the whole of Africa. Africa should detach itself from the dollar, etc., etc. But all that, of course, was just attempts to try and make him look like a Pan-Africanist in order for it to be easy for him to be used to, to propagate the policies of the imperialists, and basically for him to be able to be a better puppet, because you're a better puppet when people think that you stand for them. So the contradiction has been clear to everyone now, because everything that he does is clearly something that has been dictated by the West. We've, of course, seen the deployment of the troops in Haiti. We've, of course, seen the attempts at the deployment of troops to fight the Houthi in Yemen. We, of course, continue to see the continuous or the ongoing presence of Kenyan troops in Somalia to fight, of course, a war that's really not Kenyan, but a war that belongs to the imperialists. In the course of this year and last year, in the almost 2 years that President Ruto was in power, the director of the CIA has visited Kenya. The director of the FBI has visited Kenya. The head of the US military has also visited Kenya. As you know, the US has a military base in the coast of Kenya, in a place called Lamu. They have one of the largest bases in Africa, owned by the US. And of course, part of the agenda of his visit was to expand this base. Also, we should bear in mind that the US was recently granted permission to launch drone strikes within the Kenyan territory. Previously, they had to ask for permission before launching any drone strike, but now they have permission to do so. So anyway, so it's of course a contradiction that he is saying, or he is trying to create this image that is a Pan-Africanist, despite all this all these occurrences and all these instances, or all these realities coming out that he's indeed a puppet of the US. So for the Kenyan people, not only we, the organized forces, but the people themselves, what Pan-Africanism is a cooperation between the African people. The African people in Kenya particularly are in solidarity with the people of Haiti. But our solidarity with the people of Haiti does not entail the Kenyan police going to Haiti to perform a function that really the people of Haiti have not requested. Because when this news that Kenya was going to send the police to Haiti, was broken to the Kenyan public, the reaction was outrage, because the Kenyan people were like, okay, what are we going to do in Haiti? Of course, these are fellow African people, yes, but have they asked for the Kenyan police to be deployed to Haiti? What are we going to do there? Whose interests are we going to serve? So, of course, the contradiction, between this being a Pan-Africanist gesture and in actually, or in actual sense, it being a manifestation of imperialism became very clear at that point. Because for the people of Kenya, it was, it was really coming out as an occupation on behalf of the imperialists, and not really a gesture of solidarity with fellow African people who had actually requested solidarity. So yes, so I think that came out very, very clearly, and that's why people went to court, and that's why the court itself also ruled on the unconstitutionality of that move itself. So yes, that's what I can say about that.
So it seems based on what we're talking about and the role that Kenya has been playing, and even Erica mentioned, CARICOM and other places, what is something similar happening in the language and posturing of like countries in the Caribbean and other Latin American countries in terms of um, a narrative around this being solidarity as opposed to occupation?
Yeah. So just to clarify the issue of occupation in Haiti, it is both ahistorical and absurd to believe that the U.S. officials have any genuine concerns about the lives of African people in Haiti. The U.S. has one goal, and it has always been to maintain its hegemonic control over the Caribbean and Latin America at large. So the real reason behind this violent intervention in Haiti by the U.S. and its European allies like France and those that represented in the core group is maintaining control. So the ongoing occupation of Haiti and the calls for increased foreign military presence are justified solutions to political and economic crises, which at the Black Alliance for Peace, Haiti America's team, we acknowledge that the crisis of Haiti is a crisis of imperialism. It is not a crisis of gangs. So the country's dire economic and social conditions have led to political instability, but it's been further exacerbated by the denial of any Haitian sovereignty. So, to your point, or to the question that you asked, there is a policy called the Global Fragilities Act. The Black Alliance for Peace Haiti America's team has a thread, I believe, on Twitter if you want to learn more about it, and a few statements on our social medias about the Global Fragilities Act. But essentially, what it is, it's a U.S. foreign policy. Which is dependent on the idea that there are quote unquote fragile states and whose fragility could undermine U.S. security interests. And the U.S. defines fragile states as those where state weakness or failure would magnify threats to the American homeland. And this policy has been quietly executed in Haiti over the past 2-3 years, possibly even longer, because it was introduced through the Trump administration and overwhelmingly agreed to by the Democrats, Karen Bass specifically. So the U.S. has designated 5 countries, including Haiti, under the Global Fragilities Act to impose these strategies. In those countries, they're calling Western African Coastal Region, and it's being carried out by neocolonial states in Africa, like Kenya, and also CARICOM states, to staff a military force in not just Haiti, but also doing this on behalf of the U.S. So they're not just doing military intervention, but also, as it was mentioned by our comrades in the Communist Party of Kenya, they're doing this with NGOs and soft power institutions. They're uniting with the USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy, and they're pushing this particular policy that destabilizes or has caused destabilization in Haiti. There's also a class interest in Haiti. So
But
there's a
hold on, Erica. Sorry to interrupt you. Can you say what CARICOM is in case there's anybody who doesn't know?
Yes, CARICOM is an institution in the Caribbean made up of heads of states in the Caribbean. Haiti happened to be the very last one allowed into CARICOM, I believe in the late 90s, possibly, but it is an institution that's existed in the 50s. I do want to clarify something, though, about CARICOM, because I think even in the situation with Haiti, the way that CARICOM is perceived is in such a way where there is a belief that CARICOM itself has some particular kind of sovereignty, or is an institution that exists to sort of intervene in these kind of things that are happening with occupation in Haiti. But CARICOM really exists as a means to figure out a way how these Caribbean countries can diplomatically engage with one another as they petition for things like tourism and things like that. So they're not in constant conflict with one another as they're buying for Western dollars. So that is really essentially what CARICOM is. But CARICOM, with the help of figures like Mia Motley, positions itself as a particular savior institution in the Caribbean. So it does get involved in Haiti, where as such they are meeting secretly with the elites and ruling class of Haiti to decide how the occupation is going to come about, who's going to be leading the occupation, who's going to be the next prime minister. So this has been going on for the last couple of months, and that's the role CARICOM has been playing. So while CARICOM nations have been themselves hesitant to occupy Haiti, once Kenya gave the go-ahead, we got support from Jamaica and the Bahamas that they would too, in fact, send troops to support Kenya. So we're seeing how CARICOM is maneuvering, but it's also important to note that CARICOM did not come to this on their own. Last summer, Hakeem Jeffries and the current presidential running mate for the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris, met with CARICOM leaders to discuss Haiti's situation, and through that meeting was the eventuality of Kenya's occupation of the country. Yeah, and I can conclude there if there's anything else that you need me to.
Well, I had interjected, and you were about to get to something that I think is also really critical when you mentioned the class interests. So if you can, if you can speak on that.
Yeah, well, I think the class interest plays itself out in terms of how we're analyzing these quote unquote gangs, right? The gang violence is concentrated very specifically in Port-au-Prince. It is around the embassy, it is around the ports, none of which the working class owns or has any direct relationship with, but they are the ones being terrorized by these gangs, primarily because it's a worker struggle happening in Haiti. For the last 3 or 4 years consistently, Haitian workers have been on the streets, led by Haitian women primarily, on the streets demanding higher wages, fair practices in their workplace, etc. And because these are in opposition to the ruling class and their own interests, these paramilitary forces, which are the quote unquote gangs or violent gangs, uprisings, have been working on behalf of the ruling class and the elites to kind of tame those protests. Right. So when we're hearing about violence, especially violence against women, it's important to put into context that women have been leading a lot of the workers' struggles. And that is primarily why they're targeted, not just because they're a vulnerable, marginalized sect in Haiti, but because they are the strongest sect right now leading certain protests. And it is of particular interest of the ruling class and the elites to tame these protests so that they can carry out their interests in relation to the U.S. and other Western powers.
Oh, I thought I was on mute. So actually, I want to see if you can expand on, because I think it's important, because I think that a lot of people who would otherwise be opposed to occupation have been shown and told about gangs and about the violence, and in a way that makes it hard to understand what else can be done. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the news was just constantly harping on and talking about and using the frame of these folks as gangs, and it being uncontrollable, and there being no way that Haitians themselves, particularly the government, could get a hold on this. And you earlier used, and then just now you used paramilitary forces. And so, can you expand a little bit on the difference, and why that's important?
Yeah. Well, one, I just want to know, more recently, the U.S. Department National Security Advisor John Feiner, I believe, he met with select neocolonial puppets, or what we would refer to, what is actually referred to here as Black civil rights leaders. And that included Al Sharpton and Ron Daniels. And that meeting was to rally support around for this UN authorized multinational security mission, because it has come up against a lot of sort of blocks, right? As mentioned by our comrade, the Kenyan government was taken to the Supreme Court over this. Then it became an issue of finances. And then the ongoing, obviously, fight back against this, and more people being in opposition to this occupation kind of hindered the occupation going forward. So what was set to happen in February only just happened in June, July, because of all of these different dynamics. And where Al Sharpton and Ron Daniels and these civil rights leaders come into play is that they're openly calling for the occupation. They're using the Haiti's crisis, Ron Daniels more specifically, to fund their organizations, while spreading these negative stereotypes about Haiti. That Haiti is ungovernable, Haiti is unsafe, and Haiti needs to be saved. And they're ignoring the roles of the U.S., France, Canada, and causing this primary crisis. And they're mobilizing their followers to advocate for a U.S.-led military mission through Kenya in Haiti. So the Black Alliance for Peace has written a statement about this that you can find on blackallianceforpeace.com if you want more information about this. But I say that to say this is not dissimilar for how we understand the Black leadership class role here. And when we talk about the last 4 years since 2020, and where we were with the defund the police movement, and where we are now with the expansion of cop cities across the U.S., it has primarily been led by a particular narrative of violence and gang war and unsafe. And this is how policies have derived for further occupation of our own neighborhoods here in the U.S. So we're seeing more police erupt. We're seeing more funding into the 1033 program, which allocates military-grade weapons into our police departments, our local police departments. We're seeing more and more of this. And to the point where I mentioned the GFA and the fragile states, that is not dissimilar from Biden's Safer America's Act, which allocates more policing for the exact same reason. So when we're talking to people about the gangs, and we're talking to them primarily about, well, why do you think that a country that does not manufacture any guns, any guns anywhere, that has this crisis, why do you think it is happening? Or how do you do you see it happening in a similar way that is happening here, where we have seen in the last couple summers with the the use of the carjackings, right? Or how the youth in the carjackings, or the criminalization of the youth primarily to heighten police forces in our neighborhood, is what we're hearing about Haiti. Every so often we hear about these gangs and what follows those gangs, or what follows this extreme violence in Haiti, which again is concentrated in Port-au-Prince because they're still having Afrobeats festivals in the mountain. Like, there's still people are still traveling to Haiti. People, there's still working people in Haiti. It's happening in a very concentrated specific area for a reason. But when we hear about it, it's because they need to justify this occupation that they're using to continue to control Haiti.
Um, I'm gonna ask you this again, Erica, and stay here for a moment. With the Black Alliance for Peace, you mentioned folks being able to look at one document, but can you speak to some of the points that the alliance has called for, and is promoting as the real solutions?
Mhm. Well, primarily the end of the occupation, and how we've been calling that is not. We've been working alongside the Communist Party of Kenya to note the role that Ruto's actually playing as a puppet of Western imperialism. Even in his recent actions, there's been a plethora of private secret meetings to Washington, one of which included a security member ending up found dead in a hotel here in DC. Um, there's been the G summit, the G7 summit address, where he sort of revealed his subservience to foreign interests. The policies that's being advocated for by the Kenyan government through Ruto uh, in Kenya is in favor of U.S. imperialism, and it's exasperating economic and social inequalities. And we point these things out to say, and these are the people that you want to intervene in Haiti? Like, these are the people that are going to keep Haiti safe? Look at these myriad of contradictions that's occurring in Kenya alone, right? Look at how the Kenya police force is treating Kenyans. So what is supposed to happen to Haitians? And I think that's very important. And that's what we're naming that. Rudo's role primarily is not a Pan African's role. It's not in to be the savior of Haiti. Haiti has saved itself before. Haiti can save itself again. His role is in on behalf of U.S. interests, and he's doing it for a gold coin at that in a state dinner. He's been promised a dinner with Biden, and and that is essentially all it took. And I think that really speaks to how we are even understanding these dynamics of when we say neocolonialism or comprador class or even the Black misleadership class. Because as we talk about Arudo, we have a Kamala Harris running, right? And to not see these figures as playing subservient to U.S. imperialism, and to not understand the roles that they're playing is to continue the occupation of not just Haiti. As I noted, the GFA states that Haiti is just a laboratory. They're going to continue this on the continent. So I think it's really important that people really start to understand, and that is what the Black Alliance for Peace primarily does, is make these kind of particular connections between what is happening domestically and what is happening globally, and understanding that domestic and global imperialism remain counterparts for these very reasons.
Kali, you've been here for most of the discussion. Is there anything? We're gonna be wrapping up in about 15 minutes. Was there anything that you wanted to add or ask?
No, I mean, there's a ton more, but it probably would extend the conversation, a bit further. And I know we probably need to do a couple of things, probably in parts, and just in the interest of time. We are going to do, just so the audience know, we are going to do a part 3 next week. Looking at broader parts of what's going on in the continent right now. With protests in Nigeria, some of the repression that's going on in Uganda. We normally have some conversation with some folks from IBA region, Senegal, and then looking at what's going on with the new Sahelian Confederacy um, that's being built, right? And the questions around that, which is why we titled this series kind of Africa on the Move, in particular, just so folks know. I think I do want to come back, I think just maybe for the historical record, for our comrades in Kenya to speak also a little bit more now that I think about it. The role that Kenya played in Somalia, what it's being asked to do in particular relative to some of the conflict in southern Sudan. And then, some of the particular pieces around how it's being positioned, by U.S. imperialism in particular, to serve as another kind of garrison state, according to some of their designs, to kind of ward off, instability, both as they see it, in Somalia, what's going on with Ansar Allah over in Yemen, the threat to global trade, and their, kind of what appears to me some questions that U.S. imperialism is now starting to have about Israel in this particular role, being kind of its pit bull in the region. So if you brothers want to just talk about that a little bit, Kenya's role in kind of, playing more in the grand kind of imperial designs of U.S. imperialism. And of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about its competition with China in particular, and
Right.
how they're trying to position Kenya to be a major player in the great game.
So yeah, I mean, it was touched on a little bit earlier, but I'm glad that you brought that up for it to be expanded on, Kali, because a question that comes up is why Kenya, right? Like, many of us know that the debt um, is definitely an incentive to be able to be paid um, for, you know, different things by the United States. Not that any of that money is going to go towards helping the economy to then trickle down to helping Kenyan people, but like, what's the benefit to Kenya besides the benefit to Western powers in the United States? And it can't only be that Kenya needs money and is willing to sell itself. And then, like, what about this region compared to other parts of the continent?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot, but
And all, at some point, all the other players that are involved, from the Saudi Arabia, the UAE, the Turks, India, all these different players that are sub-imperialist powers that are also playing a role and operating in and through Kenya.
And so maybe if you can, touch on it, but because, like Kali said, we are going to be talking again next week and focusing in on the continent. Some of it may need to be tabled for next week. Do either of you want to take a shot at touching base on some of that?
Yeah, perhaps I can go ahead. I will be very brief. So first of all, why Kenya? Of course, there is the financial incentive to it. The US, for instance, in this occupation of Haiti, promised Kenya 40 billion Kenyan shillings, I believe. Yeah, that's about $400 million. Yeah, something like that. So there is the financial incentive to it, and our leaders are corrupt, and this is an opportunity for them to eat, as much as they want, and to fatten themselves and all that. But beyond that, and most importantly, historically, Kenya is a country that has been a puppet state of the West for a long time. If you go back to history, you'd see that Kenya actually um, in Africa is where we had the first armed liberation movement against colonialism. I'm sure we're all familiar with the Mau Mau War of Liberation. But what happened was that when the British colonialists saw that they were not able to win this war, what they did was to gather a group of collaborators. And these collaborators were basically the Africans who were, in bed with the colonialists. It happens everywhere. Everywhere where there's colonization, you will find collaborators. So these collaborators were an elite group of Africans. So the British gathered these people and they handed power to them. And of course, these collaborators were led by Jomo Kenyatta himself. So Jomo Kenyatta and his government was a government of collaborators. So these collaborators are the ones who established this neocolonial state of Kenya. So the reason Kenya has been able to serve as a puppet state, as a client state of imperialism, is primarily because right from the time Kenya began to exist as an independent country, it was a sham independence. And this was done in order to alienate the actual revolutionary forces that were fighting for liberation in Kenya. So I think that's the most important reason why we see Kenya time and time again playing this role as a client of imperialism. So when we look right through the governments, through the regimes of Jomo Kenyatta, his successor Daniel Arap Moi, and then Kibaki and Uhuru Kenyatta, and then now Ruto, we see Kenya play this role. During the times of Kenyatta and Moi, when African liberation movements were active against colonialism, Kenya was siding with the imperialists. When MPLA was fighting to liberate the people of Angola, Kenya was siding with UNITA and Jonas Savimbi, and he was a puppet of the West. Kenya was actually siding with UNITA. In Mozambique, Kenya was siding with Renamo against Frelimo. When the OAU was rallying African countries to boycott apartheid South Africa during the fight against apartheid, Kenya was actually maintaining relations with the apartheid government of South Africa. And this is throughout the 70s and the 80s. So similarly, during the armed liberation struggle in Zimbabwe, the Kenyan government maintained relations with the Ian Smith white settler minority regime. So Kenya has always been a client state of imperialism, and primarily all these decisions that Kenya makes to side with the imperialists are not primarily or are not only for the financial incentive, but also because it is collaborators of colonialism who were in power and who have always been in power in Kenya, right from the time that Kenya became quote unquote independent. So that is I think that's the most important thing. So when we answer this question of why, we should remember, first of all, that Kenya has always been ruled by these um, collaborators, and that's the same clique that has been in power up to today. So they're very, very glad to collaborate and to cooperate with imperialism. So I think those are just um, what some sentiments I can say, and of course those are also some of the examples of Kenya's role and participation as as a puppet of imperialism. Of course, now we see Kenya's role in Somalia extending the occupation of the imperialists there, and there is talk, of course, of Kenya also sending troops to Yemen to fight the Houthi. And recently, Kenya had sent troops to the Congo. They were withdrawn last year, but they had been there. So, and again, it was an occupation on behalf of the corporations. We all know that the corporations sponsor these armies to go there in order to protect them as they loot the resources of the Congo. So yes.
Okay.
Maybe I could bring the Chinese and the United States clash in Kenya, and maybe it's also important that there was a change on foreign policy of the Kenyan government in 2013, and this is based on certain in certain context, in the sense that after the 2007 massive the tribal war that was basically mobilized by the same political elite that have come together today to attack the Kenyan people, the United States of America and their Western allies was pressing for the prosecution of a few individuals at the International Criminal Court. Of course, the Communist Party of Kenya hold the correct line that the ICC is an imperialist court, but in that event, there was a change on policy when, at the president William Samoei Ruto now, then he was one of the accused persons in the ICC, and Jomo Kenyatta's son, which is Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, after they formed this partnership and won election in 2013, they came up with a policy of looking east. It basically means that they were turning their backs because they, according to them, the United States had been responsible for their problems of wanting to prosecute them in ICC through what they were calling the maximum pressure to have them tried in ICC. At that time, Raila Amolo Odinga was the leader of the West. Now, you will realize that the inflow of Chinese investment just didn't double, but also triple between 2013 to 2019 and actually to 2022 investment. This has been a threat to the United States' influence in our country because the United States do not invest money in infrastructure. They invest money in what they're calling soft power. So all their money goes to these reactionary NGOs that is particularly being used in you know, to align narratives and to spread this what they're calling free enterprising. But when the Chinese capital arrived in our country, you realize that when you ask how many billions of the Chinese capital have spent in Kenya, then you will see there is an infrastructure. While if you ask how many billions has the United States democracy campaign spent in our country, then you will say that they are only people who have been zombified. Actually, their reality has been turned upside down. So the United States have been able to launch even offensive through the USAID and other, you know, what they're calling so-called human rights organizations and pro-democracy movements here in our country, with a view to neutralize also the Chinese influence. Remember, in 2019, we also, as a country, embraced the Chinese yuan to be one of the bottom line currencies in the central bank. This rubbed the United States in a very wrong direction, and there has been more offensive, even more directly, when they managed to actually hijack our electoral processes and make sure that they installed William Samoei Ruto to perfect their processes on their behalf. But the influence of Chinese capital, of course, have not gone down. In fact, when President William Samoei Ruto came to power, there has been an overt attack on Chinese even business enterprises here. And that now probably out of their own frustration that they cannot get money from the West to be able to finance certain projects here, they were forced to again look east and mend their fences with them, with the Chinese government. So this is what it's also important that the United States will want to replace China as an influencing power, but for them it is about sponsoring, you know, racist rhetoric against the Chinese people. It is about hyping propaganda to defeat, the Chinese project, but not a genuine, mutual relationship. And also remember, during that 10-year period, also there was a change on foreign policy. It was the first time that the International Cuban Doctors Brigade were welcomed into our country against American pressure. So it basically means that the policy of looking east also opened up the Palestinian embassy in our country. It also solidified our relationship with Western Sahara, which was institutionalized within the Kenya Parliament, that no other president will use their executive powers to actually deport the Sahrawi ambassador here. The same period of time, the American multinationals suffered, in terms of the policy of looking east, and that is why the United States decided to recruit William Samoei Ruto, the deputy of Uhuru Kenyatta at that time, to actually replace him, to unroll all this policy. Now, the policy that is being implemented in the name of a foreign policy, President William Ruto has actually coined what he calls economic diplomacy. This is not a policy. It is basically saying that whoever have money that can give me, I am willing to relate with you without principles. So they're talking about business diplomacy, economic diplomacy, to undermine the very fundamental, principles why we should be relating with other sisterly or fraternal nations in the advancement of, humankind. This is important for us to note in the historical context.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm recognizing the time, and we want to wrap up with maybe two more points. Erica, any closing last words that you want to share? And then, along with that, can you say how people can stay up to date and be in touch? Maybe join Black Alliance for Peace in order to participate in the solidarity actions that you guys have.
Hmm. I think today is important that we're having this conversation about Haiti because today also marks the first day of the beginning of the revolution. So there's going to be information coming out about that from the Black Alliance for Peace Haiti Americas team. There is on blackallianceforpeace.com/Haiti. That is our resource page. All of our syllabuses and fact sheets on the core group and OAS and our video on what Southcom is and the role that Southcom plays is all on there for folks to keep up to date with not just what's happening in Haiti, but the Americas at large and how that's connected to Haiti. And I just wanted to just end with, while we're hearing the U.S. and we're hearing from particular Black leaders these claims for concern for the lives of Haitian people, we have to understand that the real agenda has always been to maintain hegemonic control of the entire Americas. So when we hear words like, or when we hear framing around Monroe Doctrine or America's backyard, that is a part of that maintaining of that hegemonic control. So the deployment of Kenyan police officers, which is being framed as some sort of assistance to help alleviate the violence in Haiti, is merely just another form of military occupation undermining Haitian sovereignty. So in light of Haiti's history as a laboratory of foreign intervention and ongoing struggle for sovereignty, there's a pressing need for genuine solidarity and support and not further occupation and exploitation. One of the things that I always note is that what we see in Cuban solidarity today was something that was built. It is not something that we seen 10 years ago or even 20 years ago or even 30 years ago. So we have to have that same commitment to build a mass movement in defense of Haiti. And the Black Alliance for Peace is a part of the Zone of Peace campaign, which does answer part of that question. How do we begin to create a mass movement of organizations throughout the region that support the sovereignty of not just Haiti, but the overall Americas, and that the Zone of Peace must be upheld and the sovereignty of Haiti and other nations under similar pressures must be respected. So you can learn more at blackallianceforpeace.com. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, the domination of the US on this side of the world really allows for it to continue its global domination, right? And so, oh, and thank you. I was gonna end with Bois Gaiman, and the importance of that anniversary today for the Haitian Revolution. Like, it was a ceremony and a meeting that strategically planned and launched the Haitian Revolution, right? And so we salute our ancestors for that. We Kali mentioned before, maybe you can mention in like 2 seconds what we're going to be focused on next week as a part of this Black August special on Black Liberation Media. Can you make a plug?
Just
So
plug
folks who
this.
have joined
Check
us
in with
now,
us.
join us next week. Go ahead.
No, I'll just you about to cover. So just check in with us next week. Same time. We're going to be looking more at the broader nature of Africa on the move and African people on the move. As I mentioned, Nigeria, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Senegal. Again, looking more in depth at Haiti. I think we'll probably have a few updates on what's going on in Venezuela and the destabilization campaign that's taking place there, that's being led by the United States government. So yeah, we're going to be covering a lot to close us out for the month. So definitely stay tuned.
And folks, block out 2 hours for that. We're going to be covering a lot, and we want to make sure that we try to give as much just due to all of those things as possible. And it's important. I mean, it's a lot because there's a lot going on right now, and it's critical for us to be aware. And we didn't last week really get information on how, especially potentially financially, people can support as there continues to be arrests and needs for financial support for the comrades who are getting arrested, or I mean, it may be other things that are needed besides getting arrested with the repression that's going on. Are there any ways that we on this side can support you all in Kenya concretely?
Yeah, we have a link where people could contribute certain resources for us in the party. I will just paste the link on the chat.
Okay.
But also, if you go to our website, that's the Communist Party of Kenya, communistpartyofkenya.org. You
Okay.
will find a donation link to our party, and we will appreciate any support in regard to sending solidarity to them.
Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna wrap up today's portion. See you all next week. Looking forward to seeing folks in our comments in Kenya again. Black August Resistance.
Black August Resistance.